All right, I figured out some new interesting features here. Every day that you continue to learn, you learn something a little bit different. So here I am. I figured out how to do this stuff, so it's kind of cool. But regardless, we're going to be looking at the chart, not me, but might just give a face to the voice. And we're going to be looking at Chipotle Mexican Grill today. Ticker CMG. This is by request. Let me just make sure, yeah, we're on the US stock here. And let's just take a little bit of a look at what this is. Some people definitely went to Chipotle and know what I'm talking about, but engages in the development of fast casual fresh Mexican food restaurants throughout the US. And we also have some different branches, I think. It's not just in the US, but I think primarily through the US. So established in 1993 and in Newport Beach, California is its headquarters. So I've definitely went to Chipotle before, and it was pretty good in my opinion. It's not, let's say per se, like Taco Bell or Taco Time. It's a little bit more high class. In the fast casual food category. So you go there, you kind of line up, and you get to pick your steak or your beef or your pork or your chicken, and then you can add your rice and then your salsa and your sour cream and things of that nature. So usually, when I was in the States living in Minnesota, there would be lineups right to the door sometimes. In the past, I know that they've had some stuff with food poisoning, I think, or something to that nature. I'm not really sure if it was food poisoning per se, but I think some of the ingredients were, at least there was some media coverage about something to that nature. So I'm sure that you could look it up and look at a little bit more of the history and looks like we have a pretty big market cap, 17 billion. So it's not a small company by any means. It's been around for 20 plus years. We're seeing that when it's established in 1993. And this is just some different news about the state of the virus and all this kind of stuff. If you want to take a bigger look at that, you go right ahead. And we can see here that we can do some cross analysis with, let's say, the SPX and the IXIC or the Dow Jones Industrial. And I think that's just kind of cool to see how things are correlated. And then this is the VIX volatility index. So that's this the fear in the market. So we're not going to look into that too much. I don't really get into this stuff. Well, the ideas, this is just other ideas that other people have. So good way to get lost for 1 second here. So let's pull up this chart and see how this is performed. So we're gonna go back onto the monthly cents, and I'm gonna try, since I know that my face is over here right now, I'll try not to get this this chart like right in the way so that you can't have a good visual. So this is a little bit yeah, this is kind of an interesting little chart here. It looks like, at least in terms of momentum, this is pretty clear and concise swings here. It's not just all muddied up and down. So historically speaking, yeah, it looks like it flows in nice smooth waves, and that's kind of nice if you want to like be swing trading these kind of things. Gives you a little bit more clear indication that, hey, we're having a little bit of a downswing. And on this monthly sense, I wouldn't use these indicators as very they're not going to give you enough warning that it's changing. It's almost like a little bit of a lagging indicator on a monthly sense, but all the same, I think you can appreciate the value here. Like I usually talk about, when we get the momentum higher to the tops, then we usually can see little bits of downside. And when we enter in positions in the bottom with stocks that are positively trending, which typically I wouldn't really recommend you get involved with anyone that isn't. Right here, it kind of defeats the purpose as it has a little bit of a lower touch right there. But let's just be a little bit more forgiving with that. And well, that was a horrible line here, so we're gonna have to delete that and try again. So there, you probably could draw that better, but the idea is an overall positive trending asset. So that is a positive. Looks like we have quite a bit of volume here. There's times when, yeah, you can really see some big sell-offs here. Where are we at? We're at a price of $611.69 per share, and we have an all-time high of $934. So with these stocks with bigger prices, like, I mean, it's really just the same. I mean, you get less shares, but the changes are the same. So on this monthly sense, we did have a pretty good drawback, just like everything else, but we know why. It's the global pandemic, right? I mean, so everything's going to be hit a little bit during this phase, so no one's completely immune to it. We're just going to change this to an arrow. We could say that, there's a little bit of decline in volume here. What's that really mean? Well, not too much, but we could see here, like on a monthly sense, we just had a crossover on the MACD, so we could have some downward action in the near future, down, and you can see we have a little bit of room to play within this gap right here. Also in momentum sense, we are having a little bit of a decrease, so both of those are kind of, for me, like a little bit more of an indication that we could be seeing some downward price action. So let's just go to the weekly here and see what this looks like in this sense. And yeah, we could say that it kind of had its rise up, and we're having this decline to the downside, which we obviously had that pretty decent drop. So in terms of percentage, what was that? It was 55%. So that seems to be, well, what's the average of all the stocks that dropped in the last couple of weeks? Well, you see anywhere from, I mean, we've seen some things like that have dropped like crazy, and then other things that have dropped pretty minimal. So what's the reason for that? Well, different companies will be hit harder depending on how much they're affected by this, right? I mean, so some companies that deal with, let's say, online innovation, they might not be as affected as much as someone that needs physical customers to come into their stores in order for them to be profitable. So that's where different companies will fare different in terms of the percentages that they're going to feel this this global kind of atmosphere. On this weekly sense here, let's just look and see if any of these typical technicals are working as good indicators. So on the weekly here, we have the 200-day weekly average, and this is something that I've kind of just taken a liking to more recently, but you could say that historically, we had a pretty nice touch right here. So when you start seeing the line act as either support or vice versa as resistance right here, so we have it acting as support once, it acts as resistance once, acts as resistance twice. We got supported all through here. We had a little breakthrough and we busted back up. And right about now, look where we are. We're right around this 200-day weekly moving average. So this is just the price over the last the average price over the last 200 weeks. So you can say that, like, historically, it has respected this line, and that's how I use these lines. I don't use them the same for every single thing. If you can see that it's reflective of something like that, then maybe it has some value. You can always zoom these up and see if there's a better jump on the change of the trend, and that's just where you can play around with these indicators yourself. I mean, again, tradingview.com, this is a free membership I'm using, so everyone can do this. I mean, everyone can just copy what I'm doing here, and they can go and explore and spend the time if they want to on these charts. It's a little bit of a learning curve, but the more time you spend in it, the better that it starts paying dividends, let's say. So on this weekly sense, I'm just gonna draw the top here because I like to. So we're just gonna see where we are, and I'm gonna get back to my other indicator here. So in a sense, I mean, we haven't started rounding either on a weekly, so I would be holding off thinking about week-to-week investments here as well. I mean, we can kind of appreciate that we're having this downward curl. So in terms of months to months and weeks to weeks, I mean, we could see a little bit more downside action in Chipotle, in my personal opinion. I mean, I'm not 100% correct, but yes, there is a possibility of that, and it's just going to be a matter of, like, well, how much is this going to be a corrective phase and before we continue onward, right? Is it going to be a small little correction and then continue to the to the upside, or are we going to have a more of a drawn out correction here, right? So typically we go 5 waves up, 3 waves down, 5 waves up, 3 waves down, and that's typical for a bull market. And then when we have, let's say, a bear market, that's going to shift to where it's going to go 5 waves down, 3 waves up, 5 waves down, 3 waves up. And sometimes there's certain assets or stocks or ETFs that are in neither a bull or bear market. So those kind of wave patterns don't always don't always hold true. But I think that they're cool to look at. I'm starting to see some other things here in this chart. And take this with a grain of salt always, but we can just start seeing some things here. And I think you know what I'm pointing out here. These are cups. These are cups. I mean, are these mini cycles within larger cycles? And that's how these charts work. Everything is like, it's like those Russian dolls, man. And even not even like charts. I mean, life's kind of like that too. But just to go through that again really quick, just to explain my concept. Typically, we have 5 waves up and 3 waves down in a bull market. And it's just the reverse for a bear market. So that's a typical bull market rally. But looking at this, each one of these corrective waves within here, I drew that wrong, so my apologies. It should be like that. And same thing with here. And I think my point will be made soon, and we'll move on. So even within these wave structures, there's smaller breakdowns within them. And that's just the nature of life, to be honest. I mean, not only with, let's say, stocks, but with other things as well. So yeah, that's really messy. But when you understand a little bit of the framework which forms these patterns, it can serve as a little bit more, well, it's more information, hey? So right here, you could assume there's probably 5 waves up here and a 1, 2, 3 down, and then we had another 5 waves up here, and then instead of having just another 3-wave correction cycle, it looked like it got denied. We didn't rise back up and get new highs, so we had to continue back down. And when we have more of a long-term bear market, I mean, you can see these little cups forming, right? They kind of form here, and well, when you start seeing these cup and handles, a lot of traders use this kind of price action to determine entries, right? So it's just a kind of an interesting thing to see, and you can see how that kind of plays out, right? And then we kind of jump out over that little high. So this one right here is kind of a nice setup that if you were watching this, and you could say that, hey, it's not perfectly smooth, but you could see, hey, we're approaching this all-time high here, and we were kind of having a cup formation. And even better, we're not extending into it. So if the prices came down like this, hypothetically, and then we just had like a huge bar up, and then we were challenging this all-time high, it would be a lot tougher to break through and just continue to the upside, because we already expended a lot of energy there. So it's a much better it's a much better entry to see it actually somewhat putter out and consolidate around that area. And then right here, this is where people sometimes make, well, not sometimes, they usually make, let's say, this is where they're doing more like day trading or swing trading. They might enter in a position like this and have a tight stop loss, and then they're really not risking too much. So when you look at this in percentages, I mean, if you bought in here, let's say you bought in right here, right at the top, kind of did a thing, you would be risking a loss of 7% for a potential gain of, well, who knows what it would be, right? I mean, depending on what you targeted, but let's just say you just rolled that first wave up. You got 28%, so those risk to rewards are the ones that you're looking for. You want to get good risk to reward. I mean, I'll bet you $10, let's say, and you pay me 2 to 1, and I'll pay you 1 to 1. So if you lose, you'll pay me 20, and if I lose, I'll pay you 10. Those are the kind of deals that you want to be getting with your trades. And by looking at these setups, you can just kind of time in like entry points that look a little better. I mean, it's a little bit easier said than done, but over time you can start getting a little bit of an edge in the market, and that's just what this game is. I mean, putting yourself above most people in terms of understanding and just with experience too. So when you start looking at that, you can usually see like a lot of little cups, right? When you look for them, and it's nothing to go off of exclusively. It's just like a head and shoulders pattern. I mean, everyone wants to look for head and shoulders, and you know, so you start seeing it where maybe it's not necessarily existent, right? But I'm not really sure if I would say that this is one right there, but you can almost say a head and two shoulders. Not really the angle that you usually see it. And yeah, once it broke this neckline here, it's sure a move to the downside. Um, Not really funny, but okay, you gotta laugh sometimes in this business, man. So I'm just gonna click out of this one here, and we'll just move this into a daily sense, okay? So let's go to the daily and see how some of this price action is unfolding. So yeah, it looks like, well, in a daily sense, we've had some reversal here. I mean, so we could say that there was a little bit of a buy signal right here if we wanted to do more quick trading, but didn't look like it would have fared out too well for you. You might have just seen it roll back over, and sometimes that's where looking at where we are actually in the grander cycle, it can give you an idea about what to expect, let's say, on a closer tunnel vision in here. So there's all the reason that it could fall down to any level like this, and especially considering the possibility that are we sometimes if I just space out, I'm really just seeing if I can let's say draw some type of Elliott wave. I'm not sure if I would go off of that, but I think I've made my point that typically it follows a 5-wave structure up, and if this is truly the end of 5th wave, or if this is not just the thing is, like, you can never be too certain, especially when you're not an expert. You could say that, oh yeah, this was the 3rd wave and we just had a little crappy short 5th wave, or let's just say that what if it's like this, and we're having a big 4th wave down and we're having another wave up. Well, that's how this will be misleading. I mean, it's not going to be perfect, and that's where I don't try to use it too much. I just use it as a general guide, just to kind of look and see if I can see the patterns a little bit more. But regardless, knowing that wave structures work the way they do is undeniable. So looking at this, are we following some type of ABC pattern to the downside here? So if that's the case, we had a big wave down right here in A, which consists of 5 little waves, and then the corrective wave B is going to have 3. So let's just say we draw this again. It could be something like this, where in this B wave, corrective wave, we're going to have something like that transpire, and it's pretty muddy, but that's what Elliott wave theory says. So looking at this in that standpoint, seeing this big drop in lieu of what happened, I mean, we could have a little bounce up and just trickle back down, and then it depends on probably the current state of society. If business is back open, can we continue on and rally back up to new highs? But I'm assuming, like, well, what are we going to do here? We're probably going to form a cup of some sorts. I would prophesize. I mean, when we see these things, they're usually going to have to establish some type of bottom and then come back up and challenge for these new heights. So it becomes a game of when did you get in? When did you get into this asset? And how much do you like Chipotle? I mean, it is kind of like a Subway type of setting. So there is someone kind of making your thing for you. And just in terms of how paranoid are people going to be about other people handling their food and stuff? I mean, the paranoia is only growing probably day to day for everyone about it's just you can't help it. I mean, as much as I'm probably less fearful than the average person, like, do you really just want to go and hug someone you haven't seen for a few days? I mean, everyone's telling you not to. So same thing, like, do I want to go get a sub from Subway right now? I'm thinking, man, maybe I'll just make my own sandwich. I mean, So in that kind of sense, is that going to hurt a company like Chipotle, or will people just kind of forget about it and go on with their daily lives? I mean, that is to be still uncovered. If we wanted to even continue to look up in a shorter time frame, we could see, yeah, it shows here in a 3 hour sense that we're making our descent down again. So maybe we've already expunged some of this little thing. We might have a little mark down, and maybe we'll have another little leg up. But I'd expect another C wave down, and it'd probably challenge, let's say, these levels here. So am I saying to panic sell out of this stuff? No, I'm never really suggesting anything like that ever. So when I'm going through these charts, don't take my word verbatim ever, please. I could be wrong. I could be dead wrong. So don't base your decisions off of me. The reason I'm doing this is just really for my own development. So in that sense, I'm kind of selfish because the best way you learn is teaching, and I would do this anyway, and no one would get any access to it. So why not? Why not share? Why not spread the wealth? And I guess we could say a little bit more short term, we're going to have a ceiling here of 747 to have to break through before we can consider reaching this all-time high. I would probably definitely emphasize that. We got a couple tails in here, which means that we had decent there's been some scrimmage between the bulls and the bears, let's say. One way that you can think of this, I mean, everyone always talks about the bulls and the bears, right? I mean, I don't think I have to say the bulls are the ones that, the green candles, you can say the bulls scored, and the red candles, the bears scored. But it's a constant tug of war between the people that are buying and the people that are selling. And where you see the conflict between them is these wicks. That's where we had a battle take place. And that's where you can assume that, there might be a little bit more resilience of price action, especially when you can see multiple areas throughout history that are showing this throughout this price range. Instead of just taking the tops, like taking the top, what's a good example here? Because realistically, they're only timed, right? I mean, maybe let's try to pull it up on a day sense. See if I can make my point. A lot of these have tails right now, so you can sometimes, let's just say that, let's disregard all this information. Let's just say we try to say that the top of this one right here was a good support because there's a clear top right here. But that could just be a time interval rollover, and there was actually no battle to be placed here. So when we're actually looking at, let's say the top right here, if we wanted to see exactly what's going on here at this $950 range, because right now it looks like, well, what the heck, 938, let's just say right here. But let's see what this looks like when we actually zoom it into a 3 hour sense. And now we'll go back up to this top here, and well, it looks like it actually is pretty nice and clear. Let's even zoom this up further to see if we can get make my point. Shit, man, yeah, that's actually pretty pretty concise. There's not a lot of price action there, but my point is when you zoom it in, you get a little bit more idea where the actual battle is. So instead of just taking the monthly and saying right here, the top, there's no debate. It's good to zoom in and look on the weekly and see if there is a bigger story being told in terms of where the actual support and resistance lies. So with Chipotle here, I think I'm starting to get my point across. I mean, let's just go back to this 200-day weekly because I do kind of like that. Yeah, it's tough for me to predict how this will particularly do in terms of business, but you know what, like food and these are one of the few services that aren't being shut down is actually food, right? An industry. We can't shut down people eating. So it's kind of a big question mark for me, but a very vague prediction would be some price action within here if it's going to continue along this upward trend. I mean, it's a big range here, but I would say in the short term, we could be seeing some downside action here. Just on the monthly sense, we could see it go down quite a bit because it looks like it's pretty high. So it all depends when you bought in here. If you bought in at the top here and you're down a little bit, I mean, it's still trending upwards. So maybe until it breaks this trend, maybe you want to just hold on. If it starts to, like if it starts just rolling over and starts making lower highs and lower lows, and I mean, maybe my opinion would change on this. So you could draw a couple lines in the sand and say, hey, I don't really want it to see, like, a good line would be just right here. It's last previous low. It's not a good sign to see price action break below that. Not at all. But I don't really suspect that. So for entry positions, I mean, this isn't really this doesn't make my list of like, well, this is going to be a good one. I need to get into Chipotle right now. It's going to be like that Stallone and Wesley Snipe video where there's only one restaurant. I think it was Taco Bell. I can't remember, but yeah, that was kind of funny. Anyway, Chipotle here. That's all I got to say about it. So I'm gonna call her a video. Everyone have a great day. Okay, stay safe.